Perfect Man. Is Perfect Man gone forever? Only Michael Maxwell McCallum knows for sure. Perfect Man. Story by Troy Wilson. Illustrations by Dean Griffiths. Michael Maxwell McCallum was the smallest boy in his class. He lived in a small house, in a small town, on a small street. Sometimes he went on trips with his family. Perfect Man was the greatest superhero of them all. He lived, well, no one knows where he lived. Sometimes he went to other dimensions. Michael Maxwell McCallum was Perfect Man's biggest fan. He covered his walls with Perfect Man posters. He read Perfect Man comics and played Perfect Man video games. He ate Perfect Man cereal and wore Perfect Man t-shirts. He watched Perfect Man on the 6 o'clock news. He cut Perfect Man out of the newspaper. He wrote Perfect Man stories. He made a Perfect Man website. Before he went to sleep each night, he turned out his Perfect Man lamp. He dreamed about Perfect Man. Perfect Man, Perfect Man, Perfect Man. And then Perfect Man quit, just like that. He said it was time for a change. He said it was time to start a new chapter in his life. "Who will save the world when you're gone?" the reporters asked. "I used to be the only superhero around," Perfect Man said. "These days, it's hard to keep track of them all. They'll do just fine without me." "What's your secret identity?" Perfect Man smiled. "If I told you, it wouldn't be as much of a secret, would it?" "Where will you go?" "Someplace quiet," Perfect Man said. "What will you do?" "Oh, I'll find something. After all, there's more than one way to save the world." "You must be so sad," Michael's mother said. "You must feel like you've lost your best friend." She didn't understand. She didn't know Perfect Man like he did. Perfect Man would come back, just like the time he came back from deep space when he escaped the cosmic pirates. Just like the time he came back from Dimension Z when he beat Zrog the Unbeatable. Just like the time he came back from the dead when he, well, died. He always came back. Always. That summer, Michael Maxwell McCallum watched on TV as aliens invaded New York. They always invaded New York. They never invaded his small town. The Amazing Five teamed up with Super Squadron to stop them. Perfect Man will come back, he thought. Summer ended. Michael Maxwell McCallum went back to school. And Perfect Man came back. Or maybe not. It was hard to tell. He wasn't wearing his costume. His arms were flabbier. His stomach was rounder. He didn't even call himself Perfect Man anymore. He called himself Mr. Clark. He was Michael Maxwell McCallum's new teacher. Mr. Clark never broke the chalk. He never lost his temper, and he never got sick. When Mr. Clark talked about the planets, it seemed as if he had visited them himself. When there was trouble in the schoolyard, Mr. Clark was there. When Alexander dropped his art project, Mr. Clark was there. He was everywhere at once. At least, it seemed that way. Mr. Clark was the fastest marker in the world. And best of all, Mr. Clark looked inside people. He saw all the good stuff and helped them bring it out. He helped them find their superpowers. Michael Maxwell McCallum knew Mr. Clark was Perfect Man. He was sure of it. But he didn't post it on his website. He didn't tell Mom or Dad. He didn't tell anybody. Instead, he wrote a story about Perfect Man. And in the story, Perfect Man became a teacher in a small town. Only one boy suspected his secret. When Perfect Man decided to fight crime again, he made the boy his sidekick. Michael Maxwell McCallum gave the story to Mr. Clark. "Well, that's an original story," Mr. Clark said. "It's the best Perfect Man story you've written yet. I think the ending could use a little work, though." "I know you're perfect, man," Michael said. Mr. Clark smiled. "Do I look like Perfect Man?" "You're disguised," Michael answered. "I remember how you kept Dr. Plasma's shape-changing machine when he went to jail. Or maybe your friend, the Dark Avenger, helped you out. He's a master of disguises." "Those are good theories," said Mr. Clark. "Am I right?" asked Michael. Mr. Clark didn't say yes, and he didn't say no. He said, "If Perfect Man were here today, he'd tell you exactly what I'm telling you now. You don't need to be the sidekick, Michael. You can be the superhero." "What do you mean?" asked Michael. "You already have a superpower," said Mr. Clark. "You have the power to write. You write very well." "I guess I write okay." "No," Mr. Clark insisted. "You write very well. Do you like to write?" Michael nodded. "Then I hope you keep writing," said Mr. Clark. "I really do." He paused. "Do you want to know a secret, Michael?" Michael Maxwell McCallum leaned forward. Yes, I do." "To be a good writer, you have to read and you have to write," said Mr. Clark. "But there's another step, a secret step." "What?" asked Michael. "What is it?" "You have to live," said Mr. Clark. "You have to try new things. You have to meet new people. That's what good writers do. They live, and it's all research, every second of it." Michael leaned back. He thought for a second, and then he said, "I have one question." "Yes?" "What does flying feel like?" Mr. Clark laughed. "Don't you have another story to write?" he said. Michael Maxwell McCallum did have another story to write. He had a lot of other stories to write. Some of them were wonderful, some of them were awful, and most of them were somewhere in between. He tried new things and met new friends. He made new mistakes. "It's research," he told himself over and over again. "It's all research." He grew and he wrote and he lived. Today, Mr. Clark is still a teacher. He loves what he does. Sometimes he thinks about Perfect Man and smiles. Michael Maxwell McCallum is a best-selling author. He loves what he does. Mr. Clark is Michael Maxwell McCallum's biggest fan. The end. Did you like the book? Ike and I loved it. This is me, Super Leo, and my sidekick, Incredible Ike. We like the story. It's one of our all-time favorites from years ago. We were wondering, if you could have a superpower, what would it be? And who would be your sidekick? Post it on the Teams page. Let's hear from everybody. Happy reading.